Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Before we get into tonight's game, I wanted to ask a question. Do you have extra cards lying around that you don't use? Want to buy or trade for some extra cards but don't know how to maximize the value? Then you should try out today's sponsor, Card Conduit. Card Conduit is the best service when it comes to selling your extra cards. They have three main services. Their standard service lets you send them your unsorted cards of any value. They will sort, grade, and give you the best price for your cards. Their curated service is similar. Send them your unsorted cards worth over $1 in value. They will charge half the fee of the standard service and charge no fee per card. Their sorted service is a great value as well. Choose cards in advance with their selection tool, send them sorted to Card Conduit, and they will grade and buy list them automatically. Save yourself the time of having to send to multiple sites and let Card Conduit do it instead. Their fee is only 2% with no fee per card. So give Card Conduit a try today. If you sign up with my link in the description below or use the promo code POWER, you will also get 10% off of their fees when you use their service. A big thanks to Card Conduit for sponsoring today's video. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have our Mox Pro patron Corey, piloting the partner pair of Rograkh, Son of Rograkh, and Thrasios, Triton Hero. This deck seeks to cast a polymorph effect to put Hullbreaker Horror or Tidespout Tyrant onto the battlefield, go infinite, and win the game. Corey's opening hand contains a Wheel of Fortune, Springleaf Drum, Swan Song, Scalding Tarn, Boseiju Who Endures, Chaotic Transformation, and his London Mulligan is a Moonsnare prototype. Next, we have Drake, piloting Zur the Enchanter. This deck seeks to use its commander to put Necropotence onto the battlefield and win on the end step. Drake's opening hand contains a Marsh Flats, Vampiric Tutor, Forbidden Orchard, Gemstone Mine, Mana Vault, Command Tower, and a Nexus of Fate. After that, we have Zeb, piloting Lotho, Corrupt Sheriff. This deck seeks to gain advantage with its commander before using Aristocrat effects to drain the table. Zeb's opening hand contains a Necropotence, Deadly Rollick, Sensei's Divining Top, Jeweled Lotus, Springleaf Drum, Silence, and an Urza's Saga. Finally, we have our Mox Pro patron Sean, piloting the partner pair of Dargo the Shipwrecker and Thrasios Triton Hero. This deck seeks to create infinite mana through dockside loops, then draw its deck with Thrasios. Sean's opening hand contains a Steam Vents, Ancient Tomb, Lion's Eye Diamond, Mox Opal, Neoform, Rhystic Study, and a Stern Scolding. Without further ado, let's kick off this defensive delicious degenerative dehydration. Corey won the Zoom challenge and gets to start us off. Corey draws a card for turn and plays a Scalding Tarn. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a volcanic island onto the battlefield. He casts a Springleaf Drum. He casts his commander, Rograkh, Son of Rograkh. Corey passes. Drake draws and plays a Marsh Flats. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Scrubland onto the battlefield. He casts a Mana Vault and passes the turn. Zeb draws and plays a Swamp. He casts a Jeweled Lotus. He cracks it to help cast his commander, Lotho, Corrupt Sheriff. Zeb ends his turn. Sean draws and plays a Steam Vents, and to play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts a Mox Opal. He casts a Lion's Eye Diamond. Lotho triggers, and Zeb loses a life and creates a treasure. Sean passes to Corey. Corey draws and plays a Boseiju Who Endures as his land for turn. He casts Wheel of Fortune. In response, Zeb casts Deadly Rollick for its alternate cost, exiling Rograkh. Still in response, Zeb casts Silence. Lotho triggers, and Zeb loses a life and creates a treasure. In response, Sean casts Swan Song, targeting Wheel of Fortune. Corey sinks his head, as there isn't much else to do. Swan Song counters Wheel, Corey creates a 2/2 bird, then Silence resolves. With nothing else, Corey passes to Drake. During his upkeep, Drake casts Vampiric Tutor. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. He draws and plays a Command Tower. He casts Rhystic Study. Lotho triggers, and Zeb loses a life and creates a treasure. Study resolves, and Drake ships the turn. Zeb draws and plays an Urza's Saga, getting its first counter. He casts Necropotence. Rhystic triggers, and Drake draws. Zeb casts Springleaf Drum. Lotho and Rhystic trigger, Drake draws, then Zeb loses a life and creates a treasure. Zeb activates Necropotence 5 times, paying 5 life, exiling 5 cards. He moves to his end step and puts the Necro cards into his hand. Zeb passes. Sean draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He taps it to help cast a Rhystic Study of his own. Rhystic triggers, and Drake draws. Study resolves, and Sean passes the turn. Corey draws and casts Carpet of Flowers. Drake and Sean draw through Rhystic, and Carpet resolves. Corey moves to his second main phase and adds a blue through his Carpet. He casts a Windfall. Rhystic, Lotho, and Rhystic trigger. Sean draws, Zeb loses a life and creates a treasure, then Drake draws. In response, Zeb casts Fracture on his own Necropotence in order to still have access to his graveyard. He holds priority and activates Necropotence 10 times, paying 10 life, exiling 10 cards. Both Rhystic's trigger and Drake and Sean draw. Then Fracture destroys Necropotence. Then Windfall resolves, and everyone discards their hand and draws 10. Nexus of Fate triggers, and Drake shuffles it into his library. Next, Corey plays a Taiga for turn. He casts Gamble. Both Rhystic's trigger, and Sean and Drake draw. Then Corey fetches up a card into his hand and then randomly discards a Mana Drain. Corey passes, discarding to hand size. During his draw step, Drake takes the damage from his Mana Ball. He plays a Spire of Industry as his land for turn. He casts a Mox Opal, and Sean draws from Rhystic. He casts a Scroll Rack. Lotho and Rhystic trigger, Sean draws, and Zeb loses a life and creates a treasure. Drake passes, discarding to hand size. Zeb draws, and in his first main phase, Urza Saga gets another counter. He plays a Silent Clearing for turn. He casts Esper Sentinel, and Sean and Drake draw. He casts Animate Dead, targeting Grand Abolisher in Drake's graveyard. Lotho and both Rhystic's trigger, Drake and Sean draw, then Zeb loses a life and creates a treasure. In response, Drake casts Dramatic Reversal. Esper and Rhystic trigger, and Sean and Zeb draw. Then Drake untaps all of his non-land permanents. He activates Rograkh, exiling 5 cards from his hand face down, puts 5 from his library into his hand, and then rearranges the exiled cards on top of his library. With nothing else, Animate Dead resolves, and Zeb returns Grand Abolisher to the battlefield. Next, Zeb taps Silent Clearing to cast Culling the Weak, sacrificing Esper Sentinel as an additional cost, and Drake and Sean draw. In response, Drake channels Touch the Spirit Realm, targeting Grand Abolisher. In response, Zeb casts Saw in Half, targeting Grand Abolisher. Both Rhystic's trigger, and Drake and Sean draw. Then Grand Abolisher is destroyed, and Zeb creates 2 copies of Grand Abolisher. Then Culling the Weak resolves, and Zeb adds 4 black. Next, Zeb casts Beseech the Mirror, sacrificing one of his Grand Abolishers as a bargain. Rhystic's trigger, and Sean and Drake draw. Beseech the Mirror resolves, and Zeb fetches up a Necromancy into exile, casting it, targeting Abdel Adrian in his graveyard. Rhystic's trigger, and Drake and Sean draw again. Abdel Adrian enters, and Zeb exiles Lotho, Springleaf Drum, and Necromancy, creating 3 soldiers. Necromancy triggers, Abdel is sacrificed, and Zeb returns Lotho, Springleaf Drum, and Necromancy to the battlefield. Necromancy enters, and Zeb returns Abdel to the battlefield. Zeb presents a loop of tapping his Springleaf Drum for black and white, creating soldiers, and flickering his permanents over and over. He nets infinite soldiers and infinite black and white mana. He then ends the loop with Abdel on the battlefield. Unfortunately, he cannot win, so he has to switch gears. He casts Buried Alive, paying for Rhystic's. He fetches up Loyal Retainers, Hoarding Broodlord, and Razaketh the Foul-Blooded into his graveyard. He casts Blind Obedience. He casts Arcane Signet, extorting it through Blind Obedience, with each opponent losing 1 and Zeb gaining 3. He casts Smothering Tithe, extorting it. He casts Cabal, Console of Allocation, extorting it again. Zeb moves to his end step and puts the Necro cards into his hand. Remember those? He passes, discarding to hand size. Sean draws, Tithe triggers, and Zeb creates a treasure. Sean plays a command tower for turn. He casts Chain of Vapor, targeting Blind Obedience. Rhystic and Cabal trigger, Sean loses 2 and Zeb gains 2, Drake draws, Tithe triggers, and Zeb creates a treasure. In response, Drake pays 2 life to cast Mental Misstep, targeting Chain. Cabal and Rhystic trigger, Sean draws, Tithe triggers, Zeb creates a treasure, then Drake loses 2 and Zeb gains 2. In response, Sean casts Pact of Negation, targeting Misstep. Rhystic, Cabal, and Lotho trigger, Zeb loses a life and creates a treasure, Sean loses 2 and Zeb gains 2, Drake draws a card, Tithe triggers, and Zeb creates a treasure. Then Pact counters Misstep, and Chain bounces Blind Obedience. Zeb sacrifices a land, targeting his own Necromancy. Necromancy bounces, and Abdel Adrian is sacrificed. Then Zeb stops the chain. Next, Sean casts Mox Diamond. Rhystic and Cabal trigger, Sean loses 2 and Zeb gains 2, Drake draws, Tithe triggers, and Zeb creates a treasure. Mox Diamond resolves, and Sean discards Aspire Garden. He casts a Lotus Petal. Sean loses 2 and Zeb gains 2, Drake draws, and Zeb creates a treasure. He casts a Chrome Mox. Sean loses 2 and Zeb gains 2, Drake draws, and Zeb creates another treasure. Chrome Mox resolves, and Sean imprints Mystic Remora. He casts a Tinderwall. Rhystic triggers, Drake draws, Tithe triggers, and Zeb creates a treasure. He taps Ancient Tomb to help cast Greater Good. He loses 2 and Zeb gains 2, Drake draws, and Zeb creates a treasure. In response, Zeb flashes in a Necromancy, targeting Razaketh in his graveyard. Both Rhystic's trigger, Zeb takes for Sean's, Drake draws, Tithe triggers, and Zeb creates a treasure. In response, Sean sacrifices Tinderwall to help hard cast Fierce Guardianship, targeting Necromancy. Rhystic and Cabal trigger, Sean loses 2 and Zeb gains 2, Drake draws, Tithe triggers, and Zeb creates a treasure. Necromancy is countered, and with Greater Good still in the stack, Drake casts Pact of Negation, targeting Greater Good. Cabal, Lotho, and Rhystic trigger, Sean draws, Tithe triggers, Zeb creates a treasure, Zeb loses a life and creates another treasure, then Drake loses 2 and Zeb gains 2. Then Pact counters Greater Good. With nothing else, Sean passes, discarding to hand size. Corey draws, Tithe triggers, and Zeb creates a treasure. In his main phase, Corey adds a blue through his carpet. He plays a Polluted Delta for turn. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a tropical island onto the battlefield. He casts Time Twister. Cabal and both Rhystic's trigger, Sean and Drake draw, Tithe triggers, Zeb creates 2 treasures, then Corey loses 2 and Zeb gains 2. Then Time Twister resolves, and everyone shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library and draws 7. Smothering Tithe triggers 21 times, and Zeb creates 21 treasures. He casts Rhystic Study. Rhystic, Cabal, Lotho, and Rhystic trigger. Sean draws, Tithe triggers, Zeb creates a treasure, Zeb loses a life and creates another treasure, Corey loses 2 and Zeb gains 2, Drake draws, Tithe triggers again, and Zeb creates another treasure. Then Rhystic resolves, and with nothing else, Corey ships the turn. During his upkeep, Drake's Pact of Negation goes onto the stack. In response, Drake activates Rograkh. He exiles 8, puts 8 into his hand, and then rearranges the exiled cards on top. Unfortunately, he could not find what he needs, Pact's trigger resolves, and Drake loses the game. Zeb draws, and in his first main phase, Urza's Saga triggers. Zeb sacrifices it, fetching up a mana vault onto the battlefield. He moves to combat and attacks each opponent with his thousands of Abdel Adrian soldiers. They all take it, die, and Zeb wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what a match. Congrats to Zeb on his win. The power of resource advantage cannot be understated in CEDH, and Zeb showed that off tonight. With his infinite loops, he was able to generate an overwhelming advantage, which his opponents could not overcome. This is also a great game of politics and seat order. Everyone knew that the clock was on to win in one turn, so they each had to go for it. And, not wanting to lose, they each had to stop one another to do so. Zeb sat back, let them fight it out, and then closed out the game. By the way, this game ended on turn 4. The most valuable card in tonight's game, sponsored by Luxury Playstyle, goes to, without a doubt, Rhystic's Study. I don't know what could be said that hasn't already been said about this card by now. This card is unbelievably broken and allowed for some very crazy plays this evening. At one point there were 3 Rhystics in play, and it made for a very complex stack to manage. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.